What we have here, does anybody recognize this? Somebody might even recognize it. You have to, who said Treasure Island? Good on you, man. Have you read Treasure Island? Oh, man. That's the best damn book ever. If you haven't read Treasure Island, you're a bad human being, and you deserve bad things to happen to you. So if you haven't read it, go read it. Treasure Island, if you don't know, was written by Robert Louis Stevenson. And he did it to entertain, I can't remember if it was his kid or his niece or nephew or something like that. But he just made this crap up as he went. It's a great story. And as part of the story, there's this hidden treasure and all kinds of intrigue. But he draws the map to make the story more lifelike for the kids before it ever gets published. I mean, he didn't make the story up to sell it as a book. It just kind of happened that way. And so this beautiful map he draws. And it has things like Spyglass Hill and all the great things. And I think if you look close enough, you'll see where the X is, but maybe not. So this is a wonderful map that represents Skeleton Island. Very well, something that's made up. But the problem is it has absolutely no bearing on reality of things that exist in the world. So if you think about, if I've got to find where my tools went, I think it's this one. Yep. So if you imagine this circle that I just drew, let's try that. As, hang on just a second here. Clone. Boop. Isn't this great? Can't do this on a chalkboard. Apparently I can't do it here either. There we go. All right, so if you imagine one of these circles representing the world that we live in, the actual, really true world. What happened here? There we go. And the second one represents the map. They don't overlap, do they? There's no accuracy between the two. So in this case, we have a mental model of the world, the map. We have the actual map. They just don't match. Now, if you move a little bit further in time, I love maps, so you're just going to have to live with the fact that I love maps. Clone. But I think this works reasonably well. This is a map of the world. It's actually intended to represent the world around the 15th century. So this is around the time of Christopher Columbus. And it has all kinds of cool stuff in it. Dragons be there. You know, like when you don't know what's going on, it must be dragons. This, I think, well, I wouldn't even, this section here looks nothing like North America, right? But it represents what little pieces of North America we had seen, and it was grossly distorted. Europe's not much better, but it's somewhat better. So what we have in this case, again, if this is the world here, and this is our map, in this case, we actually have more overlap, don't we? There's a section in this where the world and our mental model, our map, overlap. It's progress. It's better than just dragons be there. It's better than mythology. It's better than supposition and just making assumptions. Now finally, if I come down here far enough, it's good it's there. I was scared. This is a much more recent picture of the world, isn't it? And if you imagine this, it's messed me up. Copy. Down here, what happens is you can imagine that we have a situation where, well, I don't want to imagine that. There we go. But this one's actually a much better representation. It's not the whole world. It's not the true world. But by gosh, you can navigate pretty good with this one. You can figure out where things are. You can make good assumptions about if you know where you are and you know where, say, Moscow is, and you want to travel to Moscow. You could make intelligent statements about how to get there. In fact, I would go so far as say if you want to go to India, you could make intelligent guesses from this map on how to get there. You couldn't do that on Christopher Columbus's map because guess what? That's where he thought he was going when he bumped into the hemisphere that we live on. So what I want to introduce this idea is that we have these mental maps in our head that represent the world. And to some extent they're accurate, to some extent they're inaccurate. Our job in science is to get these two circles to come in and overlap at the greatest degree possible. And this opens some questions for us, and this particular bit's not in your book, so you'll want to be paying attention, about what we call epistemology. And epistemology is a branch of philosophy. Epistemology is a branch of philosophy that is concerned with the nature, scope, and limitations of knowledge. So, epistemology is a branch of philosophy related to, or concerned with rather, the limitations of the nature, scope, and limitations of knowledge. And what we have are three ideas that are going to be real important for us. The first is truth. And truth is kind of a tough thing to figure out and to define. We're going to have a relatively simple definition for truth. And I'm going to tell you that truth is the state in accord with reality. A belief, on the other hand, would be cognitive content held as true. And what you need to know about belief is there is no requirement for evidence in a belief. So I may believe in the 1500s that that map I showed you is a good representation of the world, what would actually be truth. So you can think of that one circle as being truth, the other being the belief, and they marginally overlap in that case, but not much. Knowledge, this is a great one. This is Plato who figures out this definition. He says knowledge is justified, true belief. So Plato's telling us that for something to be knowledge, we have to be able to demonstrate that it is in accord with the state of reality. It's not just enough to assert it. So if I'm going to say that the earth is flat or the earth is round, I have to provide some evidence for it, other than just say it seems apparent. I can't say this is an a priori truth. I can't say that everybody knows that. And by the way, at one point in time, everybody in America knew that tomatoes were poisonous. that eating them would kill you. Oops, not true, it turns out. That was a belief that was errant. So let's think about this circle here for a minute, and everything in it is belief. What are some things that would comprise beliefs? So again, beliefs are cognitive content. We hold them as true. They don't necessarily require evidence. So what are some things that would be belief? Religion would be, yep. What else? Grace, like in the religious sense, or? Oh, race. I thought you said grace, and I got you. See, yeah. So not the NASCAR kind, but the pigment kind. All right. What else? Ghost. Yep. There's belief in ghosts. Other things that we believe in? Morals, I think. What else? Dying. I'm not going to make that a verb. I'm just going to make it a... Which actually raises a rather more difficult question than you might think what life is. That's something we've kind of made up, this business of life. What else? Gravity. It's a belief. I like to think it's a justified belief. I think there's a lot of good evidence, but it is a belief. Remember, it's cognitive content. These don't require evidence, but you could have evidence. Yep. Ideals. Like conscience. Okay. So, morals. Okay. Yeah, all right. What else? Time. Anything else? Now, I think this is worth some of your time between now and the next class. If you're not able to just reel off a lot of things that are beliefs, then that's evidence that you're not fully understanding what beliefs are. You should be able to reel off a lot of examples. And then what becomes more difficult is when we get to the idea of truth and go, okay, now what's justified true belief? Then that becomes a little tougher because you have to be able to demonstrate very clearly what's going on. But, things like political views, theory of gravity, theory of evolution, all belief. You could just go on and on. Yes, ma'am?
Would traditions fall under belief?
Traditions could, yeah. Depending on how you were thinking about them. As a guiding force for behavior, it certainly would be, yes. All right, so now we have our circles again. And we've got this pesky belief over here and truth. So what we want to do is try to provide a circumstance where these overlap. If you give me just a moment here to make sure I'm not... Yep. And what I'm going to tell you is this overlap. So we've got those things we believe. We have these things that are true. And what do you suppose this shaded area where they overlapped? Which of those phrases that we just talked about would? Knowledge. Very good. So notice there's a whole bunch of area where things don't overlap. And there are presumably pieces in the circle that are withheld in truth that we'll never know. You know, there's this thing, where socks go in the dryer, probably be in that we'll never know. They just won't. They just go away. So this leads us to the idea then, if knowledge is our target, if it's what we really want to have happen, how do we get there? How do we figure out what's going on? Well, what I'm going to suggest to you is that there are multiple modes of thought or approaches that we use to gaining information. And for each one of these ways, there are strengths and weaknesses. So, what is one way that you might have beliefs? Where might beliefs come from? Okay, so if they're coming from your parents or your grandparents, why do you believe them? I'm not saying you shouldn't. I'm just saying why. Because they do, because they believe in it. Okay, so what's the relationship, I guess is what I want to say. What's the relationship between you and a parent? There's one of trust. What else? Respect. How many of you have religious or philosophical beliefs? And so where do they come from? Okay, so what I'm trying to get at, I'm not asking the right questions here, is there's a certain amount of information we accept on the basis of authority, right? Much of what you learn in your classes, you accept from your teachers on the basis of authority, that whoever's talking to you should be someone who knows what they're talking about. So if your mom or dad tells you something, they're an authority figure, you feel like you can trust them to know what was going on. In ecclesiastical terms, you hopefully could be able to trust the people in the church hierarchy as being being good representations of knowledge, so on and so forth. So there's authority is one way. Sometimes we just think we know, right? We have this sense of intuition. So intuition is a way that we sometimes know. Reason and rationalism. So remember, early philosophers, they didn't trust sensory experience at all. So what they thought you had to do was just sit and by pure reason. Remember Critique of Pure Reason? Just figure out, starting from some basic starting points, you should be able to think out anything. That's what we mean by that. Then this term should look familiar. Empiricism, remember talking about that? And then finally, so what was empiricism? On experiences. So observing things, right? Seeing things happen. And then we have science, which is also going to involve the manipulation of things and then observing. So what's the strength of information or beliefs that you gain through authority? What's the strength of information you gain through authority, belief you get through authority? Why is that a good way to learn things?
Authority figures have usually been evaluated by their peers and chosen to be put in the place.
All right. It's often correct. Right? So, I mean, you should be able to have a certain amount of faith that I'm just not making up everything as I go. I mean, it's maybe 70-80% tops that I make up, and that other 20-30% is real psychology. So you could trust that far, right? So it's often right, is what I'm telling you. And it's also an easy way to gain information. Just go ask somebody. Go read a book. It's not labor intensive. You don't have to do a lot of thought. Now, what's the weakness of authority and the information you get through authority? Yeah, it could be one-sided. It's not tested in the sense that it's been checked out. It could be one-sided. It could be biased. It could be incorrect. Now, in the case of some sorts of authority, if it's a good source of authority, then we should be able to, if you say, well, why do you believe that's true? I tell you, people are very confident in information they have. Why do I believe that? I could show you studies like the one I referred at the top of the class about the racetrack betting and how confident people were. I could come up with other studies that were evidence. So I should be able to back it up, but maybe not necessarily. It may just be because, I'm the authority and that's just how it is. All right? So what's the strength of intuition? What's the... also authority saves you having to figure everything out on your own. So I guess that's intuition is also often correct. Intuition kind of comes from all the subconscious processing that goes on. Again, as I've hinted at, very little of our brain's content and its function is immediately available to us from moment to moment. There's a lot going on underneath the hood, if you will, that never comes to our consciousness, but we kind of have these senses of things to do. So it's very often correct, but it's very often incorrect. Can you think of a time where you were absolutely sure about something based on intuition and found out quite embarrassingly socially to be wrong? No, never any of you guys. I can think of times where I've had intuitions that turned out to be wrong. So it's probably not the best way to figure out important things. Intuition, by the way, is often a very good first step in the scientific method. It gives us an idea to study. It can be the roots of something. Reason and rationalism. What do you think would make that strong? What would make that a good way to get information or beliefs? It's tested in what way? Okay, because remember, pure reason says, I don't need experiments. I don't need observations. I'm just going to sit here and think it out. So it's not tested in the sense that you go out and see if you were right. Its strengths have to do with the fact that it's well ordered. And it's logical. So there are rules of thinking. So you can't shift terms in mid-argument. So you can't get away with the argument with pure reason of, remember I think I did use this last week. Love is blind. God is love. Therefore, Ray Charles is God. Right? That I'm shifting terms. That's not a logical argument. So a pure reason argument would prevent me from getting away with that. The weaknesses are that it's completely dependent on our mental models being right. So if my mental model is incorrect, then my reasoning is going to be flawed. So it's dependent on my mental models being correct. So if I'm starting with my mental model being that tomatoes are poisonous, that's my starting point. All my reasoning is going to be flawed that follows. So suppose for a moment that we want to travel to the moon. We want to spend a spaceship up to the moon, and we believe the moon is made out of blue cheese. That's my mental model, that piece of information. That's going to dramatically impact how I go about solving this problem, because I think it's going to be hard to land a ship on a chunk of blue cheese. It's going to be too squishy, isn't it? So reason and rationalism is only as good as your belief systems, the untested beliefs. Empiricism. Now, what would be good about empiricism as a way to gain beliefs? What do you think? Yeah, it's experience. There's real world experience. So my blue cheese problem gets solved. It's plausible. Now, what would be the problem of empiricism by itself as a way of gaining knowledge? Where might we go wrong? Limited exposure. So there might be another explanation. There's no manipulation. Of variables. There's no looking for alternate explanations. And again, I'll give you an example that I'm sure I've used in here already. Suppose you're that city manager and you have fire engines that are in your control, right? And you notice that the more fire... Have I used this example in here before? Okay, so imagine you're a city manager and you're responsible for all the property that a city owns. It includes fire trucks. And you might notice that those fires where you send more trucks to have more property damage. Right? Now, you could conclude from that information that the cause of excessive property damage at fires is sending fire trucks. It's a wonderful correlation. More fire trucks, more damage. Yeah, well, there's tons of these. So we need to make sure we have all explanations. If we don't manipulate things, we can't figure out whether that's true. Now, it turns out there's a real easy way to test out that correlation to see if it's causal. You could take the really dumb step of not sending fire trucks. Because so if I sent fewer fire trucks, that would reduce the amount of damage. Then the logical next step would be to send no fire trucks and there'd be no fire damage at all. Because guess what? Where the fire trucks don't get sent, there's never fires. So empiricism doesn't allow us to manipulate things. And it turns out that manipulating variables is extraordinarily important if we're going to have high quality belief. Science, on the other hand, has the strength of control. We conduct experiments under very careful conditions. So we make sure that third variables don't come into play. We make sure that only one thing is free to change at a time. Science is also self-correcting. It may surprise you to know Newton and Einstein are both wrong in their physics. We know this. We can't figure out where, but we know that they're not both right, and we know that neither are right. We know they get parts of it right, but not all of it. So if we had an authority-based physics, Newton, suppose he was the person we decided was right, would have been the final word. And so we'd have never figured out general relativity. We wouldn't move forward. Science is self-correcting in that if you're someone like Einstein, you can see where the theory that's out there doesn't explain things right. It doesn't cover all of the possibilities. So you put out a better theory, and it gets tested against evidence. Eventually, I'm very confident someone's going to sort out the discrepancy between Newton and Einstein. Our theories of evolution get better all the time. And if you really want, if you can bring the evidence, if you can bring that experiment that proves natural selection wrong, guess what? You're a Nobel Prize winner, and it's going to happen fast. That's going to be a lulu of an experiment. But it's self-correct. Science is self-correcting as a discipline because evidence, not authority, rules supreme. Evidence, not my well-rationed equation, rules supreme. And there's a thing in science called peer review, to where if I'm going to publish a research journal article, this article I write with the evidence gets sent to people in the field who study that thing, and they look for flaws. So it's self-correcting. We get better and better all the time. The weaknesses of science, because there are some. Why don't we do everything with science? Well, it's labor intensive. It's hard work. Well, all right, so who asked that? Somebody. Suppose you have a car? All right, so suppose you come out to your car in the morning, you turn the key, and nothing happens. In science, if you're going to use the full-blown scientific method, you would list out all the possible things that might be going wrong. And you would design an experiment for each of the things that go wrong. And you might spend the next 6 months going through them very systematically. I think I have a few more minutes. And that would just take forever and be prohibitively expensive, particularly if you're hiring someone to do it. On the other hand, what you really do is you get under the hood and you wiggle maybe the battery cables and things that you sort of know work. And very often, so your intuition and empiricism, past experience, you go and do a couple things and boom, you're on the road. So that's why it's the downside. You wouldn't want to solve every problem with it. You save science for the hard problems, the things that are really tough to figure out.